This podcast has been brought to you by Voyager's World. We are building the most amazing hospitality network. Please visit our website, join us for free, and start participating.
Very well. So about a year ago, I hosted an event at a bar. We were there to watch a motorcycle race, and this guy showed up. His name is Reese, and I'm very happy to have you here, man.
Oh, it's good to be
Yeah.
here.
Chris is another crazy dude. Please tell us where you're from, man.
So I don't sound like it, but I actually grew up in the U.S. I'm from Tennessee, so I don't have the native accent that all of us really kind of talk like when we want to speak with anyone that we really know back home.
Mhm.
No, I dropped that a long time ago when I entered university. So
Cool, cool. So Chris, you have been couch surfing
Mhm.
a lot.
Mhm.
You traveled a lot.
Mhm.
Uh, and what caught my attention is that when we were having some conversations uh, about all kind of subjects,
Mhm.
I was having the impression that you were much older than you are, because apparently you have so much experience. It seems
Mhm.
that you started bumping heads when you were still 14, I guess,
Mhm. Mhm.
or somehow you acquired a lot of experience and maturity very early. So I was really surprised to know that you're actually very young, but
Mhm.
very wise at the same time. So how did that begin?
So I'd say it started when I was younger. I always liked learning. I always liked finding new things and putting myself in new situations.
Mhm.
So when I was a teenager, I went through a pretty rough period. I was anorexic and I was having some trouble with depression and just a lot of bad shit was happening. Um, and then when I came out the other side, I decided that pushing myself was a better option than just doing what I'd been doing. So I started doing things like I started practicing like traditional martial arts, got into that a lot. I mean, I was involved with that for maybe 8 years. I'm on a break now because I'm fat and lazy, but and I'm working all the time. But I'm hoping to get back into it.
Mhm.
And I just started opening myself up to new things, to new experiences.
Mhm.
Went to university, and yeah, I just kept myself open to new things.
And where was it? It was in Memphis, right?
Knoxville.
Knoxville.
Yeah, other side of the state. So Memphis is on the Mississippi River, and then
Uh-huh.
you got Nashville in the middle, and then there's Knoxville,
Uh-huh.
um, right next to the Smoky Mountains in
I
East
have been
Tennessee.
I have been around Knoxville when I was riding to the that 114. It's called the Dragon. It's called the Tail of the Dragon. It's a very famous motorcycle ride,
Mhm.
and so I remember going by Knoxville, but I never really spent time visiting Tennessee, and I'm looking forward to that because of music.
Mhm.
Uh, Tennessee has a very rich and a long
Yes.
story around music, and you have played for a while, right?
Yeah, I started playing the guitar when I was maybe 12, 11, something like that. I was really young. I don't remember exactly when. And I took private lessons until I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm 22, so I guess that means I've played for over a decade, maybe,
Wow.
depending on how well I have my dates in order.
Mm-hmm. What did you play the most, and
I played the guitar.
who did you play with, or is that any big name that?
No big names that I've played with. No, I played with different people, had some fun with a few different groups. Personally, I played everything from jazz to blues to I even was for a very short time, like in my teenage years, was part of like a garage like hard rock or garage metal band that never really did anything. But
Mhm.
but I played a little bit of everything, and now I'm out of practice. But
So you are playing even before you are allowed to drink,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And what else around that time? Fighting, playing music.
fighting, playing music, and people are always confused when I tell them about the combination. They say, "Oh, but couldn't you injure your hands or couldn't you hurt yourself?" And I say, "Yes, I did it a lot. I went to my high school graduation with 2 broken fingers. I mean, they weren't broken. They were just like the joint was a little bit injured. But yeah, at my high school graduation, I couldn't quite like hold on to my diploma very well because my hand was hurt.
You had to put your diploma in your mouth when
Yeah,
you're
basically. I'm shaking the guy's hand like, "Oh God, please don't, please don't, please don't, please don't."
Oh! Okay. But did you go to college then, or
Yeah,
what?
I went to
What happened?
university. So I didn't grow up in Knoxville. I grew up in a small town halfway between Chattanooga and Knoxville called Decatur. And if you've never heard of it, that's because the population of the city is something like 3,000 people.
Mhm.
Like everyone knows everyone, and most people are related to each other.
Oh yeah.
Which,
We make a lot of jokes about that.
which actually, being in high school, because my family wasn't from the area, it meant that like the potential for dating was quite nice because I was one of the few guys that wasn't related to everyone. But I moved.
So everybody else are dating their cousins and their sisters and
Second, third,
you
fourth,
were-
fifth cousins. Yeah. So from there, I moved to Knoxville for university, which is going from like a town of 3,000 people to a city of, I think, 200,000 or 300,000. So not a huge city. It's not a huge city, but it was big. Like for a small country boy like me, that was like the big city. Like
Well, this podcast is watched by people all over the world, and sometimes it's like in a place like in Brazil, when people hear 200, 300,000 people, they will think that it's a small place. But
Yep.
in America, the cities are
Yes.
spread out.
yes,
So 200, 300 people would be like a 500,000 city
yeah.
in some other country.
Yeah, it's like living here, living in Ukraine. People say, "Oh, I'm from a small town. The population was like 2 million people." I'm like, "Oh, I'm from a small town too. The population was."
Exactly.
And they say, "No, that's a village." And I say, "Oh, yeah, you're right."
That's right. So what brought you to Ukraine?
So I started traveling a bit before Ukraine. I always wanted to travel. That was the big thing. Is growing up in a small town, you get two kinds of people. To me, I mean, I don't want to be like reductionist or something, but you get two kinds of people. You get the people who love it and never leave, and the people who hate it and will do anything not to go back.
Uh-huh.
So I was one of the latter. I was one of the second. So I moved to university, and then my university was only an hour away from home, but to me it felt like it was like an ocean away from home.
Mhm.
Like the freedom and like living in this big city where I could do things and go out on the weekends and see concerts and just really anything was really cool to me.
Mhm.
And then my third year, I had the opportunity to be an exchange student. And when people hear that, they say, "Okay, well, he came from a very rich family. He came from, he had some money, he had some privilege." And yeah, my family, definitely when I was in university, we weren't poor. But when I studied abroad, I actually saved money. I saved, now, during the course of everything, I, of course, spent more. But
Mhm.
when I studied abroad, I saved about somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000, and that was even after buying a $1,500 plane ticket.
Mhm.
So
And where was that?
Hong Kong.
Uh-huh.
So because I was clever and I had good resources and I was academically strong, I qualified for all the scholarships and the grants and the money that you can find tucked away in little corners.
Mhm.
And I was able to go study in Hong Kong cheaper than I could have studied in America for 6 months,
Mhm.
which is kind of crazy. Like most people, they hear that and they say, "Oh my God, how the hell could that?"
Yeah, but was it cheaper because you got scholarships or resources that were not available in America, or could we say that, yeah, if you apply to go to Boston, for example, you could get the same opportunity,
No.
or was it
So there
like,
were definitely some things from my university that were specifically for people who were studying abroad, or specifically for people who wanted to be exchange students. Like there was somewhere between, I don't remember if it was $1,000 or $2,000 in grants just for that. But there were also other things. For example, at my university in Hong Kong, there was subsidized housing. So and the government subsidized housing for all students in Hong Kong. So it wasn't just like me that was paying this, it was like all Hong Kongese students. And many honestly preferred to live on campus because it was cheaper. Whereas in America, if you live at a university campus, it's much more expensive than living off. Yes. So to live,
I don't know any of it because I barely finished high school. I finished high school on a plea bargain.
Yeah,
so it's not, it wasn't.
So the way it worked at my university was, if you lived on campus, you would probably pay somewhere between $4,000 to $5,000 for the academic year, or you could split an apartment off campus and pay $3,000 maybe. And that's for the whole year, not just for the academic year. It's including the summers, and it would be nicer. Now, comparatively in Hong Kong, I think I paid $800 for 4 months. 4 months rent for $800. Even though rent in Hong Kong, it's very, very high. In many cases, it's even more expensive than like rent in America. But because the government subsidized housing, I was lucky.
And what else did you do?
So when I was in Hong Kong, there's a nice thing about Hong Kong is that you can fly anywhere else in the region for around about $250 round trip. So of course I went to China. I spent 2 years studying Mandarin in university. So going through Shanghai and Beijing was quite easy. After that, I spent some time in Taiwan, spent some time in Korea, Japan, Macau. So spent some time just traveling around the region.
So you became fluent in Mandarin?
Not fluent, no. And I haven't spoken in like 2 years, so...
Is that right that people say, oh, do you speak Chinese, but there is no such a thing?
Yeah.
Right? So you speak either Mandarin or what? What are the two?
The two most common are Putonghua and Guangdonghua. The first one, Putonghua, is what they speak in mainland China. It's what most people, in English we usually call it Mandarin.
Okay.
And then there's Cantonese, or Guangdonghua. So it's what they speak, or what they used to speak in South China in the Guangdong province. And now it's mainly only spoken in Hong Kong and in Macau.
Okay. But you got functional, even though not...
Yeah, I could do most things. Like now my pronunciation's completely terrible because I've forgotten everything, but...
My pronunciation of English is also terrible.
Well, so is mine. I didn't grow up in an English-speaking region. I grew up in America.
Yes. What else did you do then after?
So after that, I returned to America, finished my university degree. And then after I finished my degree, well, while I was finishing my degree, I wanted to go to graduate school to get my PhD in anthropology. And I was waitlisted by 2 schools, and I didn't get in. Because it was just, it was really a fluke. Like statistically, like the odds were in my favor, and they weren't. So it didn't happen, and I said, okay, well, fuck. What do I do now? So I started applying for jobs abroad. And I applied for a few jobs in Thailand, I applied for jobs in Ukraine, in Thailand, in Russia, and I finally found an opportunity. To teach English in Ukraine.
Oh, so you came to Ukraine already knowing that you were going to do that?
Yeah, knowing that I was going to teach. I arrived with all of the arrangements, with my housing arranged, and with where I would teach arranged.
Did it happen according to plan?
No. Nothing ever happens according to plan. But once I got here, I got settled. I discovered that I really really like teaching, and I knew that I liked teaching from when I had taught some guitar lessons to people, and as part of like working with traditional martial arts and all of that, a big part of working at, I don't want to say the advanced level because it makes me sound like a dick, but at the higher levels, especially like Shodan Nidan level is instruction. So I already had some experience teaching, knew that I liked it, but I started teaching English and discovered that actually I really really like this, and I think I might want to make it a career. So I've stayed for a year, and I'm working on all sorts of fancy certifications now that will make me more qualified, more professional.
Yeah, by the way, a lot of people come to Ukraine and to other countries from America. They end up teaching English, and that is a solution that a lot of expats use to be able to live abroad. Can you tell a little bit about the industry? Because you know it a lot more than I do.
Yeah. So, the first thing you need to know about teaching English abroad is that there's a lot of diversity in the industry. Some positions are formal jobs, some positions are more like volunteer positions where they pay for your room and board and housing, but you're not a paid employee, you're a volunteer. And so these positions typically don't pay as well, obviously because you're working for your roof, not for a paycheck. And the hardest part of the job, the hardest part of the job is definitely going to be, depending on where you're working, your registration. Because it's very easy to fall into a trap with a company that doesn't want to or can't get you the appropriate registration. Fortunately, where I work, all of my papers are in order and everything's fine. But I know some people that have also had trouble. And for some places, for example, Ukraine, the process is notoriously arbitrary.
I keep in mind that some people don't care, some people don't mind.
Yeah.
But there are some countries in which you have to.
Yes.
Like Ukraine is very relaxed today about, foreigners, and they don't really care, and you can overstay, and all that I'm saying here is allegedly. Okay, allegedly you can overstay. And there is no consequence to that. But in some countries, the consequences are serious. Like in Brazil, they, if for any reason the cops check, ask for your papers and you don't have the proper stay, they are going to put you in the car and take you to the airport. And that's it. That's the end of your visit.
And theoretically, actually, in Ukraine too, they can do that. It's just usually like a cop can stop you on the street and ask you for your papers. Yeah, it's just usually they don't. Usually they have more pressing concerns. I remember I was in Russia a couple months ago, and walking around Moscow, I was always told that I should keep my passport on me at all times, because if a cop stops you and says, I need to see your papers, you better have them.
This sounds so much like one of those German, Nazi stories, German movies, where they stop you on the street and papier, and all that.
Yeah, and I never had anyone in Russia ask me for my papers or ask me for anything. So it never really happened, but it was just something that you were warned about. This is possible.
And going from, for an American, going from Ukraine into Russia, and then that entire trip, was any of it particularly difficult or bureaucratic, or was there anything special about it?
I was actually pretty fortunate because I have all of the appropriate documentation for what I do in Ukraine, and I'm legal, and I'm so because I'm fortunate, because not everyone's as lucky as I am. I had for example, my Ukrainian residency permit, and I had a lot of supporting documents. So when I went to apply for my Russian visa, the process was actually pretty simple. But keep in mind, I already had a Chinese visa, a Ukrainian visa, a Ukrainian residency permit. So I already had a lot of supporting documents. And when I went there, they actually said, well, you qualify for a 3-year multiple entry visa. So I have a 3-year tourist visa to Russia.
Okay.
And it wasn't terribly difficult for me. But I also had all the appropriate documents. And really, that's one of the biggest things I would recommend. Because when I was in university, I studied anthropology, and I studied particularly refugee, right? Or I spent some time, I won't say particularly studied, because I focused on other things too, but I studied like refugee law a little bit, refugee policy, the way that immigration generally works, and one of the biggest pieces of advice that I could give to anyone is do the fucking paperwork. If you have all the appropriate documents, all the right papers, and you do your homework and find out what you need beforehand, it makes the process so much easier and so much faster. So that was the other thing too. Like when I went to the Russian embassy, I had a stack of papers that included everything they could possibly need. I didn't take any chances. So they reviewed my application and everything was fine. And the same thing for Ukraine.
All right, so new cameras. Let's see if this gets better now. I'm confident it is. So that conversation about passports and all that, it reminds me of the old movies about, Second World War and the Germans or the Gestapo, asking for papers. But so it wasn't too bad.
No, it wasn't too bad. There's a lot of really heavy passport control, and there's a lot of security, especially in Moscow. I was in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and St. Petersburg wasn't so bad. St. Petersburg is much more relaxed. But in Moscow, there's a lot of security. So you don't have just some Russian cop walking up to you and saying, "Документы, пожалуйста," if they hear you speaking English. But it's definitely, you get this feeling, and it's the same as, the best way to describe it is, it's the same as if I was in Beijing. In Beijing, you also get this sense that everything is very securitized. Like you have to go through security when you enter the metro. And when you enter a shopping mall, you go through security. When you enter the airport, you go through security. And when you go to your gate, you go through security again. And so it's just this very, I don't know, securitized feeling that you like. But it's not that it necessarily feels safe. It just feels like someone's watching you all the time.
I feel a little more neurotic in a situation like this. When there is too much security, it may suggest that is too much threat. And it's like when you go to Washington D.C. Washington D.C. has more cops per capita than any other place in the world. And the impression I get is that, wow, there is a war about to start here any moment now.
I know, and DC doesn't even have the cold to deter them. Like in Moscow, it gets cold enough that everyone says, "Oh fuck it, let's go home." But
Yes. Let's start a jihad. Yeah, but let's do that during summer.
Let's do it in the summer when it's comfortable.
Yeah, it would be better. I noticed when the first time that I came to Europe and then went back to America, it shattered one of the impressions that I had that Europe was going to be more bureaucratic or more intrusive. Because I would read in books that, I got to the hotel and then I had to give my passport and all that. But that practice of holding your passport at the hotel, it still exists, but it's rare. It's not normal anymore. It's just like in America. You walk out, you bring your key with you, and you don't need to drop it off, and you don't need to leave your passport. I guess the passport thing was more common before credit cards.
Probably.
When they were worried that you would not pay.
That you just skip the bill. And...
Exactly. But now they don't care. They worry about the money, not about who you are. And even in countries where by law you have to register, like it is a lot of them. In Italy,
for example,
Italy, it's like 5 days. You have
Russia.
to register. in Italy nobody does and nobody cares.
Mhm.
Here, there are some requirements like that. Then people don't do and nobody remembers. And so. Uh, but in America, you cannot get on a bus without showing your ID.
Yeah.
In Europe, you can get in a train and go a bus or train. You can travel. So I noticed that the things you can do without ID in Europe, there are many more things that you can do without showing any papers.
Yeah. I know, for example, I I've stayed at a few places using like Airbnb, or I go and buy bus tickets or something, and it's just okay. Here's your bus ticket. You've paid. Or, for example, I usually when I travel, I stay with Airbnb just because the prices are about the same. I prefer to stay with people, or to rent from people than big hostels. It's usually more comfortable, and even then, it's just like, okay, you have a profile, you have a picture. Okay, good to meet you.
Yes. Funny, you are asked for your name at Starbucks more often than at any transport system here. So Russia, Eastern Europe, you know a little bit, and you have been to some other places in Europe as well, right? And what are your impressions and your preferences?
So for Eastern Europe,
I quite like Kiev. I quite like Ukraine. There are other cities in Ukraine I think I like more. For example, Lviv is quite nice. Lviv on the border with Poland. For any of the Americans like me watching this who have no idea about world geography. But yeah, it's on the border with Poland. It's quite a nice city. It's very, very nice. I understand you've been there quite a few times.
No, 4 times.
4 times.
Yeah, but it to me it has a feel. You look. Sometimes you look around, you forget that you're in Ukraine. It feels like you are in Slovakia. It has that architecture and that influence from a lot of invasions, I guess. And or the borders here moved many times during the 20th century.
For example, I was in Lithuania last month. I was in Vilnius, Lithuania, and when you read about like Lithuanian history and Polish history, and when you compare that with like Russian history and Ukrainian history, because they're all just right there next to each other, and you just see these borders changing all the time over like the past 1,000 years.
Yeah, here they tell a joke that this old man is applying for a job, and they ask about his life. So he says, "Well, I was born in Hungary, but then I went to school in Germany, and then uh, I had my first job in Austria, and then I developed my career, and I got married in the Soviet Union, and now I live in Ukraine." They say, "Wow, so you traveled a lot?" I said, "No, I never left Mukashevo." And when I went to Mukashevo, I asked locals about it, and they said, "Oh yeah, totally. If the guy was born around 1920 or so, he could have that sequence in his life." And they told me that, like, not now, because now the situation is different, but like in the 80s, people would ask your age, and they would go like, "So you are German and Austrian and you're Hungarian." So they would tell you all your nationalities that you had in that city based on your age. It was kind of a game. Yeah. So here in Eastern Europe, I see that a lot. There is a lot of that. But in general, I don't know if you felt that. I have the impression that different parts of the world have different. They all have problems with hate or racism or
everybody
or
hates
nationalism
somebody.
But the hate lines are cut differently. In like in America, they are more racial. There is more xenophobia. So it's like either you are from there or you're not, or if you are brown, that's a problem.
And for example,
or racial.
In Hong Kong, it's mainland China. If you're from
Yeah.
mainland China in
Yeah.
Hong Kong, they don't like you.
Yeah,
It's-
but in Europe, I noticed that it's much more political. It's much more based on the lines on the map. You know, like everybody picks on the Hungarians, and the Hungarians then don't like the Croatians. The Croatians don't like the Serbians, and then the Spanish don't like the French don't like the Italians. Nobody likes the Germans. The Dutch don't like the Dutch. It's a crazy situation, and of course I cannot be too critical of it. We have our own troubles, you know, in America, but the cut is different. You know, I tell Europeans, wow, you guys treat us so well. Like you know, Americans, we feel very welcome in Europe.
Yes.
But you are dicks to each other. You know, like you treat each other like shit.
Well,
you know,
it's this thing.
It's like you always hate your neighbor. I mean, look at like British history, like Britain and France. They hated each other for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and then yeah, they're neighbors. You always hate your neighbor.
They still pick on
America
each other.
and Mexico,
yeah, they still pick on each other. And then, you know, and if America, now the new joke is that if America keeps insisting on stupid ideas like building a wall between U.S. and Mexico, then very soon Canada will build a wall between Canada and U.S. to separate themselves from that stupidity.
No, it's really a miracle that we've lived so close to Canada for so long and they don't hate us yet. It's,
Yes. Well, maybe because, you know, Canada and U.S. really have a lot of cooperation, politically, economically. You know, it's you can joke that Canada is the 51st state, or you know, there is a lot. You know, there is so much in common. So, what else did you observe?
living in Ukraine, I've noticed that, well, specifically living in Kiev. Living in Kiev, I've noticed that there's a lot of cooperation. And in many ways, I think particularly Kiev works like a small town. In many ways.
I would say so. I get that feeling. Unless you drive, it's not a stressful city. It's not stressful at all. You know, their attitude is, they don't have that New Yorker attitude that everything is in a hurry. You know, it can't be anyway, because everything here takes 3 times as long.
Right, because of the 5 stamps you need to get your shovel.
Yeah, you have, or like the story you told me that you had to pay money to pay money. Yeah, tell us that.
So when I was doing my registration paperwork for Ukraine, that was a very long process to get my residency permit. Very long, very painful process to get it. Because you need an original copy of the same document about 5 different times, and it takes you a month to get it. And that's not a problem the first time when you have 60 days to get it. But the last time when you have 2 weeks to wait a month, it's not really, doesn't really work. So I finally get everything done, finished. All I have to do is pay for my residency permit, which is something silly like 10 hryvnia. Like it was something silly.
Just a small fee.
Or no, it may be, no, I remember, it's like 110 hryvnia. 110 hryvnia at the time was something like €4, $5.
$5,
at the time.
yeah.
And so to pay my 110 hryvnia, I had to go to a machine in the special building. This woman just watching the machine to make sure no one would break it, I guess. And you pay the money into it, and then you have to pay 120 because there's a 10 hryvnia commission
to pay in cash.
Yeah, to pay. Well, you can only pay in cash.
So you had to pay 10 hryvnia to pay 110 hryvnia. Okay.
Pay money to pay money.
Yeah.
And this was the only place that you could do it in this city. So it wasn't like there was an option. It was where I'm registered. It was the only way. It's the only way to do it.
Different countries will have similar things too. You know, in America we are used to things being relatively simple. I was looking online the other day how to renew my driver license, for example, and it was just a matter of paying $30, something like it, paying $30 online.
Send them a new picture.
Giving no, not even.
Oh, you don't need a new picture.
Not even. No, do you think they want my picture? No, not even that. In Massachusetts, it was just a matter of pay the $30, give the address to send the driver license anywhere in America, and they would just put that in the mail. That's it. No testing, nothing. It varies state by state, but in general, it's something like that. Except immigration. Immigration in America is Byzantine. It's something unbelievably bureaucratic, and not because the law requires to be that way. It's just that it evolved that way. Gradually. For example, several processes to avoid corruption, I believe, maybe that was the thinking behind it. They separate every part of the process in different processing centers. So if you need to get this paper, you need to fill the form and send it to a place in Vermont. For this other part of the process, you need to send this to Idaho, and for this other part, you need to send this to Texas. So in each one of these places, they do completely separate parts of your process. So consequently, everything takes really a long time. And if in one part of the process they ask for an original document, and they want the same document in another part, you have to send it again. And original in America means if you don't have the original, you have to go to whatever institution or organization that gave you the original one and ask for another. Well, for an immigrant, that may mean asking for a piece of paper in another country where you are not. And in a lot of countries, the only way that you can order that is in person. So it's a mess. It's a complete mess.
And it's like
like the same thing happened to me when I was here. Is that I needed this one document. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was the one that it took me a month to get. And so I needed it in the first place, and then I needed it in regional registration. So they said, okay, well, we need the original document. So I asked them, I said, well, the embassy in Moldova has the original document. They should have it on file, Can you call them and have them fax it over? No, we need the original document. And that was the only way they would do it. Just the only way they would do it.
Yes. I remember applying for a visa for my ex-wife, and we needed criminal records, from Brazil, and then we apply with that paper, but it says that report cannot be more than 90 days old. And then at the end of the process, it was nearing the end and almost everything done, then they said, no, we cannot finish it. So why? Because this document is not 90 days old. It's more than 90 days old. Well, but it was less than 90 days old when we gave it to you, right? And plus, she's not in Brazil during this time, so her criminal record it's impossible to change. She is here by definition. She's applying here. You have her passport. So you know that. Nope, still had to get the paper again. So it's not a. If you think of it as a human process done by humans, it doesn't make any sense.
It's a process made by bureaucrats who are not people anymore.
It's a process that is not. It's just like a company is not a person. Like a bureaucracy is not a person. It doesn't think and doesn't process ideas like a person does. So you may have rules that in the real world don't make any sense. Like you need to update your criminal history. Papers in a country where you are not, right? Things like that. Completely absurd. But happy, that thing is done.
That part is done.
Now, some of us win every now and then. Some of us win.
Occasionally, yeah. And that is, I heard one day a guy telling me, a friend, I was applying for some benefit that I was not getting, and it was not easy. And the guy said, "Man, give them the paper they want; they'll give you the paper you want." It's simple. And what they wanted was something absurd. It was like something that didn't make any sense. Say, apply, get the paper anyway. Get the paper anyway. Give it to them. It doesn't make sense, right? But that's what it is. What is on their list,
right?
It's like sometimes you have sometimes the bureaucrat will even tell you how to do the absurd thing just to fulfill the requirements, and then you move forward.
Yeah, I remember there was I was applying for one of my visas, and there was a problem with I needed a letter to prove that I could get the visa. It was like a statement of purpose or something. And when I took the letter to the embassy, they said, "No, this doesn't work for the visa that you're applying for." I said, "Well, why not?" Well, there's this one word here. There's one word here that it validates the rest of it. I'm like, so what can I do? I have to leave. Like I need this visa by tomorrow. Like what can I do? And they said, just change the letter. Like if you can get us a new copy of the letter by the end of the day, like even like email a photo of a notarized copy, then we can do it today. I'm like, you just told me what to change the word to. Like you said, change it from this word to this word. And yeah, that's fine. Because it doesn't, and this is the strangest thing about visas, and it's just like what you were saying. It doesn't matter who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah.
It matters that all of your documents are correct.
Yeah, it matters that it matches a certain list.
Yeah.
You know, and the moment that the bureaucrat can say that, yeah, he provided everything that was on the list, it's good enough. So man, you did a lot of crazy shit. So that fighting part, and you know the characters that you met along the way.
Yeah. You meet some pretty interesting people.
Yeah, I remember I started. I would like you to like repeat the short version of it about that fight that you told in the club once.
So I will repeat the clean version.
So basically, I was competing in a match.
No, there are no kids watching. You know, it's just between us. Nobody's watching. It's just between us.
So I was competing in a competition once, and I get in the ring, and there's this guy opposite me. And I was a little bit unsure about the fight. I was a little bit unsure about the match. And this dude is fucking massive. Like, he probably outweighed me by 100 pounds. And so I'm fighting. And then I try to throw a kick. And he blocks it. And I think to myself, okay, my foot's hurt. I'm not that bad off. My foot's fine. I'm okay. It hurts a little bit, and we keep going. And then finally, I'm stepping on it more, and it's hurting more and more. So finally, I hit him. Finally, I hit him in the face with my foot that's hurt because it hurt to put weight on it. It was better to hit him with it. And I won. And I won at that moment, like I won. So I finish, I'm done, and I go sit down after the match. And I go sit down after the match, and I realize that I can't stand. At this point, my foot is like so much in pain that I cannot stand. I cannot walk. I cannot do anything. So I go to leave, and because of a situation that had emerged, I had to leave quickly. And so we're leaving, and I go to stand up, and I'm like, oh fuck, gotta go, and I go to step, and my foot just doesn't work. My foot just nope, and I fall straight to the ground. And so I'm still in this situation where I need to leave quickly. I won't go into too much detail with it. But I needed to leave very, very quickly.
In other words, you need to leave the city.
Yeah, I needed to get out.
So I'm walking over, and I'm hobbling at this point. It's like it's sad, and I get in the car, and we're leaving, and I'm just, and so they're like, "What the hell happened? Why were you so slow?" Guys, I think my foot's broken. It turned out that in that match, I had broken like 3 or 4 bones in my foot. At one time, simultaneously, just pop, and everything broke.
Man, you have some crazy crazy shit that you have done. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. We have some fun sometimes.
I feel like I'm conventional compared to that. At least during my 20s and my early years, I was so conventional. I was a not a bureaucrat, but I used to work at the mayor's how's it called,
Yeah,
the city
mayor's.
hall.
Yeah.
I used to work at the city hall, and then later computers showed up, and then I started working computers. So I was a stay in the office kind of guy. Before that, I was a kid raised indoors.
Yeah, and an office to me sounds like a special kind of hell reserved for people that.
I used to like it. I used to be kind
Really?
of. I used to. Not anymore, but I used to be very conventional. Uh, had regular jobs, and then I believe in building a career and make money, and and then find some big, amazing corporation to work for, like Apple, or or if it was today, I would be thinking, oh, I need to work for Tesla. I need to work for which I believe these companies are much better than what I was facing at that time,
Right.
as possibilities. And I end up working for a big pharmaceutical company. And that's what it took to push me over the edge, to convince me that, this is not for me. It's a life like this is nice, except if you don't want it.
Yeah.
And I realized that I don't. So I had the house out in the suburbs, with 2 acres of land around it, and cats and minivan and motorcycle and a big sedan and 2 TVs, and this totally regular life. And that's when I rebelled. But when I rebelled, it really completely looked like, or maybe it was, but it really looked like a midlife crisis, because I rebelled against my job, against the lifestyle, against the cars, and the marriage, all at the same time. And I got out of all of it at the same time. So I guess that from any point of view, out of mind, it feels like a midlife crisis. It looks like that.
Yeah, so I guess I kind of went through something similar than just an early life crisis, because I had graduated from university, but I didn't like the way my job prospects looked in America. I mean, I could have gotten a job probably. I wouldn't have liked it.
Did you have any debt that would force you into work?
Fortunately, no. I had a lot of scholarships, and I was very, very lucky because my parents and my grandparents helped out with the rest. Okay. And they did that for my sister and I both.
Okay.
And so I was very lucky. I was graduating without any debt. And I had a little bit of freedom. And I tried grad school, but it didn't work out. And I didn't like the idea of just going and working. Because to me, I wanted something a bit more exciting. I wanted something more. And so I started looking at it. And because of some things that had changed in my life, I was in a position where I could look to do these things. And I generally believe that, and this is just more of like a general life philosophy for me, is that to be reductionist again, there are 2 kinds of people. There are people who talk about things and people who do things.
Yeah.
And I always knew so many people that would say things like, oh, if I were younger, oh, if I had the money, oh, if I had the time, oh, if I didn't have a career. And I looked at that and I said, okay, I have none of these things. I have no money, I have no career, I have no anything, so what can I do? Because apparently having all of these things will stop me.
Or at least it seems to be the excuse du jour for everybody else.
Right.
So I said, okay, well, instead of thinking about why I can't, let's think about how I can. So I found a good opportunity here, and I accepted it. I didn't look back.
Just yesterday, I was having a conversation with a friend, a person that I like, and I think is very well intended and smart, and actually has some experience traveling and all that. But then we were talking about the same thing: work, career, life. And she was saying, "Oh, I would love to do this. I would love to travel and do this thing or go to that place, but I have a daughter, or I would like to do that, but I need to get an apartment. I would like to do that, but I need to do." And at some point, what I didn't argue with her anymore about the excuses themselves,
Right.
because, yeah, she says, "Well, I would like to travel like this, but I have a daughter." Well, what about the people that do travel and they have daughters?
Yeah.
And they bring them along. Or what about the people that travel sometimes for many years with their kids, raising their kids? But I thought of a different approach that a friend of mine, he's a Buddhist, he suggested that once. He said, just look at the phrase that you're using. You're saying, "I would love to do this, but," and then there is the excuse, right? Well, sometimes the excuse is valid. So try just saying the phrase again, but remove everything that comes before the word "but." So instead of saying, "I would love to travel, but I need to buy an apartment," then the phrase becomes, "I need to buy an apartment." That's fine too. There is no wrong answer. There is no wrong choice. Right? And just embrace that. Embrace that now is the time in your life in which you dig having an apartment.
Yeah.
But the problem is that if you say, "I would like to do that, but I need to do this," now you don't enjoy either.
Right.
Right? And I think that I'm often suggesting that to people now. Having the job, the wife, the dog, the cat, the house, and now and the minivan, it's fine. It's totally fine, unless you don't want.
Right. And that's like I was telling someone the other day. I said to them, because they were asking me about how did I get involved with like living abroad and how they should go about it, and they were saying, "Oh, well, what about this and what about this and what about this?" And I said there are two things you have to remember: is that if you start living like this, then you have to make choices. And the second thing that you have to remember is that, and this is something a lot of people don't think about, is that after you make those choices, you have to remember that it was you that chose these things. It wasn't somebody else. It wasn't something you were forced to do. It was your choice to do it. So that sounds like a very autonomous kind of way of thinking about it. But you have to remember when things get shitty that it was you that chose it. Now, and that means that you can do one of two things. You can say, "Okay, well, I've put myself in this situation and I wish I weren't here and I hate it," and you can get really depressed. I've seen some people do that. Or you can say, "Okay, this is what I chose. How can I make it better? How can I make my decision the right decision?"
I find it quite surprising when I meet young people that have a very good tolerance for fear, for anxiety. Because if you are living a very free life, it carries a lot of anxiety with it, because you don't know in which direction you end up going.
Right.
It feels more or less natural to me now, but I'm not a 20-year-old, and I have been doing this for many years. When I left my job, the last job that I had was the pharmaceutical company, and it had a great salary. For a job, it was good. I wasn't out in the cold. I was, in a nice office with people that were, kind and treat me well. I was the oddball there, so I cannot say that, "Oh, that job sucked." No, I wanted that job, right, at some point. But when I left, I would say I had, for about a year or maybe a year and a half, I had frequent nightmares. Those recurring dreams, And in the recurring dream was that I would be like in a building, in a office building, uh, usually a very sophisticated, very beautiful building, but every time a different building. You know, I repeat the dream, but not the building.
Right.
Always a new building, and either I was just hired again by that same company or by that same team to work for the same manager. So either I was hired again or I was applying again to work with them. And in the dream, every time I would be walking through the offices and walking through the building, trying to find my office. And I would feel like such a failure because what can be more ridiculous than you having a job and not finding your own office?
Right.
It was the equivalent of when you have dreams of getting to school but you forgot to bring your shoes, you know, like you forgot your underwear and you are in school. So I had that dream for quite a while.
And I think when you start living those freer kinds of lifestyles, is that, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that any fear, any anxiety that you have, especially if you're like me, like I'm a pretty neurotic person. Anyone who spends a lot of time around me notices that I'm the person that tends to think about everything that could possibly go wrong. And when you're that kind of person, I think switching to a freer lifestyle or living or moving abroad or just any major life change brings out anything. Any anxiety, any fear that you have, it brings it right to the front, and you can't hide it anymore. You can't like press it down with work or think about other things. No, you have to deal with it. You have to deal with it head on. You can't avoid it. So anything that you are anxious about, any worries that you have, they're going to kick your ass at first. I mean, it happened to me too. I remember after I moved here, I had to face the realizations that, hey, if anything, and this was for the first bit, that if anything happened to me, I was alone. And that was the first time in my life that I'd really ever been alone.
So did you go through a certain time during this phase that you thought that you were facing the possibility of having to call back and ask for help to return? Like, would you run into zero?
If anything
It happened like really, really bad, then yes, I would have had to do that. I mean, it would have been necessary.
Yeah, I had a pretty bad test in December when, I don't remember now, December or January, when I got sick, and it was pretty bad. I had another kidney stone crisis. This one was shorter than the other ones, though, so not as bad as the first time. But you know, it's debilitating. You cannot move, and you don't know if it's going to get worse. But I felt better when I called a friend, and he said, okay, I understand the situation. Let me call you back in a little bit. And he called me about an hour later. He said, look, I talked to a friend of mine. He's the director in a hospital, and he gave me the phone number. And he said, and if it gets worse, if you need to be taken care of, you call this number and you get in a cab and you go to this hospital, and they are going to take care of you. And he knows, you know, you don't need to fill out paperwork or anything. You know, you are taken care of. So that comfort, that was very comforting. You know, made me feel like, oh fuck, I'm home. You know, like it's okay now. And plus, my neighbors that I rent the apartment from them, you know, they were there. They were asking me, oh, do you need anything? If you need any medicine, we'll pick it up for you. And they helped me on that. And so with that around me, I didn't feel you know, displaced. But if I was in Miami, I would feel okay too, because I have enough friends around me and I have enough people that I can count on. But I could be as near as, let's say, Tennessee,
Yeah.
I would be in trouble.
Yeah,
I would say,
yeah.
okay, here I'm in trouble here.
Yeah, and that's one of the difficult things about when you
Yeah.
move, and when you
Yeah.
move a very long distance, is that there is going to be a period of time where you are isolated.
Yeah.
And you have to end that as soon as possible. If you're working, talk to your coworkers. If you have a bar down the street, go down on Friday and meet some people.
And have some friends.
Yeah.
You know, Jesus, make some friends.
Yeah.
You know, and be there for them. You know, because that's the only way you can build it. It's by being a good friend for them first. You know, so but you need to build a network around you. And here I felt that, and financially as well. You know, I have been through some bad, some good and bad times. So financially, it was very tight in 2010 before I went to on that run, and then last year I was in Miami, and it got quite tight again.
Right.
And again, the only thing that made me not feel that, oh shit, things are really black, is that I had a lot of friends. That kind of saved the day, because money, after many years. So I said earlier that I felt very anxious when I left that job,
Right.
and I had those dreams, right, those bad dreams about it, and I was asking myself, did I fuck this up? No, did I drop a great job?
There's this part whenever you make a big change like that, and it's never immediate. It's like 2 months down the road that you say, "Oh fuck, what have I done?"
And I was wondering if I was too arrogant to think that I could keep a similar lifestyle, because in fact I left that job and my lifestyle, my spending style, didn't change. And I had, because of my severance package, I had the same salary for 1 year. I had 1 year of unemployment coverage. But when that year was gone, then my income dropped to zero. And no health insurance, nothing.
Right.
Yeah. And that's when, reality hit. It took me about 2 years to get back to the same income. But so for that 1 year, I was freaking out, right? That was also the same year that I was divorcing, and it's not I wouldn't say that it was this that triggered the divorce. It would be very unfair,
right,
towards my ex-wife to say that. No, the marriage was already on the ropes,
right?
Before all this change,
right.
So it was like the last 2 years were bad, but then yes, that was the last straw, and then we separated and all that. But the funny thing is that I was very anxious from the time that I ran out of income until I had again the same income. But I was still just as anxious 1 year later, when my income was already like twice as much.
Right.
I was still feeling shitty because I was still wondering, did I fuck this up?
Right.
Because now I didn't have a certainty of a check by the end of the month. Now it depended on me. That transition, I would say, it took me like 4 or 5 years just to feel okay about it. Just to feel that it doesn't matter if I don't have a good financial situation right now. I can put some attention on it and I'll fix it.
Right.
And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that when you make that decision, that you always have to remember it's your decision. If you burned any bridges, they didn't just spontaneously combust into flames. No, you lit the match and you burned them. Like, you may have had help from the other end, but you were holding your fucking torch, and you played a part in burning that bridge down. And for me personally, whenever I start getting those feelings and I don't get them anymore. For me, after about the first 2, 3, 4 months of living here, I kind of realized that no, actually I made the right decision. But I may be naive for doing it that quickly, but I just had to remind myself during those first 2 months that no, in fact, I chose this. And I chose all of it. I didn't just choose the parts I like. I chose all of it.
Yeah.
And I just had to come to terms with that. And then I came to terms with it. Things got better.
Yeah. No, and I agree that everything that you did was your choice.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that I parse that statement correctly with you here, because I believe that yes, the choices were yours, but the outcomes are not necessarily yours, because on the outcomes are a mix, more or less of a 50-50 mix of your choices plus chance, plus chance, so even though you take responsibility for all your choices, you understand that you are not guilty of all your outcomes as much as you should not congratulate yourself too much either, because part of it is chance.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I could have gotten, for example, when I returned from Russia in January, pretty much the day after I got back, I caught this terrible flu that was going around Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing was nasty.
I had it too. Yeah.
Because I hadn't gotten the flu in maybe 10 years that I can remember. And maybe 5 or 6, but a long fucking time. And I was in bed for 2 days. Like I was in bed for 2 days. Now I was very, very fortunate because I had Vika to take care of me, and we were living together, so she was able to take care of me. But if I hadn't had Vika, then I would have been in trouble because I needed medicine. I needed
but I think that you have enough friends here that if you called someone,
I would have been okay.
If you would call me, I would say, okay, man, send me your address.
Yeah, of course.
I'll bring you a can of soup,
chicken
soup.
And,
but something would get done.
Right, but if that had happened
the first month, that would have been bad.
In trouble.
That would have been really bad.
Yes.
I think it's a very complicated situation. Unless you really believe that it's temporary.
Right.
It's like having a shitty job. If you believe that it's just for a couple months, I just need to pay these bills and and get rid of this problem, or I need to buy a new motorcycle to continue traveling, something like that. You will tolerate a shitty job, no problem. You may do that happy, But if you get the impression that you're stuck in it, stuck in a job or stuck in a situation, then it gets super scary. And that's why I'm not insistent anymore, or I especially not very critical when people are not taking the step ahead, because they are not seeing that yet. Especially if all they did so far was having jobs.
Right.
They are very used to that security of, okay, or at least they believe, all right, by Friday I'll have a check, and that gives some comfort.
Yeah.
And it's like for example, when I moved to Ukraine, I spoke no Russian, no Ukrainian. So and now I speak just a little bit of both, more Russian than Ukrainian, but I have personal reasons for that.
Yeah.
And I remember when I would talk to people, and they would say, "Oh, but you don't speak the language. How do you survive?" You learn language, And people would say, "Oh, but how do you do this and how do you do that?" At a certain point, it was just that a lot of people don't. They like that security of knowing what will happen.
On the language specifically, I have very strong opinions. I think that for some things, for some purposes, and depending on your lifestyle, not knowing the language is an advantage. So when you are a visitor, when you are a visitor, you get away with a lot more by not knowing the language, as long as you're perceived as a welcome visitor.
Right.
So let me qualify that a little better. Let's say you are a Mexican immigrant in America,
Yeah.
and you don't know any English,
You're fucked.
it's going to get tougher.
Yeah.
Because now you depend on only the Spanish speakers
Right.
in the country. So it's going to be a tougher situation. Now imagine you are a biker, you're riding a motorcycle, and you are American, and you are visiting Romania, for example, and you arrive at any place and people look at that, you don't even need to know a word. They will totally get out of their way to try to help and figure out what it is. They'll call a cousin that knows some English, and they'll do something, and they'll try to help you. I have a someone that I know that he travels by sailboat a lot. And he said, every country that I go, I just learn how to say, excuse me, thank you, and hi. I only learned 3 things, and everything else happens naturally, So if you can project a funny or interesting or strong image for that situation, like you are traveling, you're an adventurer, or you are a student, or you are even as a tourist. Not knowing the language is not a problem.
For example,
it's only a problem when you are an immigrant and you are perceived as being from a country that is sending a lot of immigrants. That's the only situation where it's...
And for example, here, like now that I speak more, that I speak more Russian, now that I mainly understand more Ukrainian, just because I'm a bit lazy studying. Some things are certainly easier. Because like if I go into the cafe, or if I go into a cafe somewhere, I understand everything they're telling me. I can communicate with them, no problem. If I need to buy something, I can ask, what should I buy? I can ask for recommendations, get the thing that I need, and it's usually not a problem. And the thing that you notice is, for example, I was in a shop the other day, and this is one of the, I guess, privileges of being a foreigner, because there are some privileges to being a foreigner. There are some bad things, but there are also some privileges.
Definitely. Yeah.
Particularly if English is your native language. Particularly if you speak English well, for that matter. I was in a market buying something. I don't remember. But I had used to go there and speak in English with them, just asking, because I didn't know what everything was called. And coming back a little bit later, my Russian had improved. I learned the words for everything I needed, so I was speaking with the attendant in Russian, not in English. And she looks at me for a second, and she asks me, and she switches to English and asks me, I think I remember you. Can we speak English? Is that okay? And I was buying a cell phone in December, and I went into the store with Vika, and we were discussing, because normally when we're about to buy something, we discuss in English, so that we can have kind of a private conversation, even if the shopkeeper's there. And so we were speaking with the shopkeeper in Russian, speaking to each other in English, and then finally the guy who was selling it, he says, actually, he's like, I speak English. I'll speak English with you while we do this. And I said, no, it's I said, well, thank you, but because I was quite happy with this, because it made my life easier.
Yeah.
But I said, we can. If it's not a big deal to speak in Russian. It's I understand everything you're telling me.
Yeah.
I just may have to use Vika as my translator if it's something more complicated.
Yeah.
And he said, no. I never get the chance to speak. So a lot of times that does happen. And I don't want to sound like smug or arrogant or like, and say like, oh, people should do this, but it's a fact of life that it does happen.
Don't they talk a lot about white privilege in America now?
Let
me tell you about the American privilege now, the gringo privilege.
Yeah.
A friend of mine was telling this. You know him, John.
Yeah.
He was telling this, that he went to a store, and this is particular to Eastern Europe actually. He went to the store and it was closing. And most of these big stores have a security guy, right?
Yeah.
So the guy was closing the door. And he went there and he said, hey, I just need to... But he said that in English and the guy was not understanding anything. And the guy opened the door again, and then he said, "Oh, thank you for letting me in," and he went in. And he observed that there were other people that wanted to get into the store as well. And the security guy stopped everybody else. And someone said, "Yeah, but you let that one in." He said, "Yeah, but that one is American."
Yeah,
so
that does happen sometimes.
No, but that's half of the story. The other half is that everybody that was there protesting it, they said, "Oh, okay." So they accepted that. Which is bullshit. Too,
yeah, which is
right?
bullshit. Yeah,
exactly.
It shouldn't happen.
Exactly.
But
so he had to. So he made an exception to him just because he was a foreigner. But the public also did it. You know, and to me, those two things are bizarre. Yeah, they are bizarre in our.
Because
in
they
our
should have been pissed off. Yeah, it's not.
They are bizarre in our advantage. And I'm not saying that I never took advantage of that.
Right.
But.
Right.
Because even if we don't realize that we've done it, we've probably done it more than we would like to admit.
Sometimes, yes.
I had several situations that, especially here in Ukraine, in which sometimes I didn't know if I was being treated so well because I am foreigner, or because they like me, right?
Yeah.
But, or they like, or the way they like this. I discovered actually the answer to that when I was at Tarasova Gora during a biker event. I was standing there, and you know, several times I was just outside of the bar, and I would be standing there, and people would come over and start talking to me, and I would be quiet, just smile. I would just smile to them. And they would be, you know, come over and be, you know, start talking to me, and they already bring me a beer, you know, and offer me a beer first. I still didn't say a word. They don't know that I'm not Ukrainian yet. And they are already treating me well, you know. Or people where, when my bike broke down there, and there were people working on it, at some point I went to see if I could find a part, which is a part of the computer for the bike. So I went around, you know, the park trying to find another Valkyrie and convince someone to let me use their bike. And so that took an hour. When I came back, there were like 2 more people working on my bike. You know, so when I left, there were 2 people. When I came back, there were 4. And then those 2 new people that were working on the bike, then they were introduced to me. And then I said, "Oh, you're not Ukrainian." You know, now they knew. So they were helping already.
Yeah, before
without knowing that I was.
Yeah, and that happens. That happens a lot.
Yeah. So I see that here there is a lot of this helpfulness and friendliness that is very spontaneous.
And generally, I find that if you are
nice and smiling and helpful, that people, even if there's a language problem, people are willing to help you. And yes, you'll get some people that say, "Oh, fucking foreigner, speak the fucking language, you fucking dickbag." But and that does happen. That has happened to me. It's just I've also experienced the other end. And generally, if you're happy and smiling and helpful, you don't have problems.
So here that is a certain level of very intense and extra friendliness. Yeah. And on top of that, there is the gringo privilege, right?
Yeah.
So there is an extra layer. And on top of that, that is the fact that I was riding a motorcycle, and that also calls attention. It's like, I think that the only thing that calls more attention and makes you more welcome than riding in with a motorcycle is riding in with a motorcycle and a pretty girl. That's the only way that you top that. Nothing else. But the entire attitude, I noticed in some other places in interesting ways. Have you been to France?
I'm going to France in the summer, but I have not been yet.
So let me tell you what is my opinion of France. Okay, Americans usually like to say that, oh, the French don't like Americans, they don't treat us well, they are, you know, like they're very proud, and you know, they tell you to speak French, you know, stuff like that.
Everything an American would tell you to do in America.
You know, that argument I think is completely bogus because try going to Tennessee speaking French. See how far you go. It's not going to work.
Exactly.
Right?
You'll get some guy with 3 teeth telling you, "Yo, you better speak that damn American language." And
speak American.
Speak American. And I can say this because I'm from there.
I know. So that argument is completely bogus. But try. You go to France. Of course, they will be speaking French. But here's my experience. I remember 2 situations where it became evident. One was in Paris, where I was there with a girl from Amsterdam, so she's Dutch, and we got lost. That was right before GPS was. There was GPS, like I had it on my iPhone. It was my first iPhone or second iPhone. But I didn't have a plan that would have data at the same time, so my GPS was not doing anything. So we got lost a little bit, and we start talking to someone, asking in English, and we asked, can you, she was trying a little bit of French, I was trying a little bit of French, but it was a Franglish mix. Yeah. And the guy said in perfect French accent, he said, "No, I think I can help you in English." And he went out of his way to explain to us and make sure that we got to the right place. And so he used all the English that he knew, right? And we had a few other situations that we needed directions and I never experienced that indifference or or someone not answering because they're not. No, they still will try, just like we do. I didn't see any difference. But then there was another day in Montpellier where I parked my bike, and I was waiting for my host to come over with the key to the apartment, and so I was sitting there for like half an hour drinking a beer, and several people stopped. Now that is the motorcycle effect too, right? Several people stopped, they wanted to take photos and they want to talk, and even if they didn't speak English, they would still try, and then I would try to help with French, but the friendliness was across the board. So my impression of French is of the French people is that yes, there is a certain percentage of French that don't like Americans, but they don't have any particular feelings about Americans. Yeah. It's the same people that don't like German, don't like Italian, they don't like Spanish, they don't like English, they don't even like French from other parts of France. Yeah. They are not giving us any privilege of hating us more than anybody else.
Well, it's like you talk about, like, for example, people being helpful. I remember when I was in Japan, I was in Osaka, and I had gotten the troop that I was traveling with. There were 5 of us. And I had gotten all of us lost. All of us. All of us together. I was singularly responsible for getting all of us lost. And we weren't just kind of lost. So we have no GPS, no map of the area, no. And so we stopped into a gas station.
You're driving?
No, we were on foot. Okay. On foot in a gas station, though, in Osaka.
Okay, okay.
Or it may have just been a convenience store, but I think it had a gas station, too, which was strange in Osaka. Not strange, but uncommon. And so we stop in, ask for directions, and they start pulling out maps and maps and maps and maps between, like, the 2 of us who spoke this much Japanese, and they finally explain it, and we try and find it from his directions, and we still can't find it. And we know we're nearby, but we can't quite find it. And there's this old guy washing his car outside of his house. And so we finally just say, okay, look, we're going to ask him. And there's a thing about being a foreigner in Japan is that you can't usually hide it.
No.
So for example, some people here, they don't know I'm not Ukrainian until they speak to me, and they realize that I don't speak Ukrainian, and that my Russian's bad, and I have a terrible accent. In Japan, you can't hide it. So we woke up and And we said in Japanese, excuse me, we're lost. We're trying to find the station. And he says, okay, just in English, he says, okay, well, where are you from? And we told him, well, we're all, it just so happened that all of us this time were Americans, but from different parts of America. So one from Florida, one from the Midwest, 2 from Tennessee. So he finally says, okay. He's like, well, and he starts thinking about it. And he says, well, I'll show you. So he stops washing his car. Halfway through washing it, stops washing it, walks us to the metro station. And he asks us after this, it's like, is there anything else I can do? Like, he's like, do you need any help finding anything else? Do you need to know how to get here? Like, do you need to know how to get anywhere in the city? And that was just like after already helping us, was like, is there anything else I can do? And there's this stereotype, I think, of especially Japanese people, that whenever they see a foreigner, they just...
Well, they have several ways that through their language and through their attitude, especially older people there, it's a very homogeneous country.
Yes, like 98%.
And a lot of Japanese, even people that told me amazing, great stories about it. They say, yeah, it's still gaijin still is not really a compliment. Gaijin. It's in a literal translation is barbarian. It's not foreigner, it's barbarian. That is that connotation. But in practice, in the actions, they are very polite.
Very different.
They are very. If they don't like you, they will still be super polite
with you.
And that was the one thing too that you had to be very careful.
And if they are part of the majority,
that actually will be very sympathetic and friendly, then they'll go all of their way. It's going to be amazing. This is the third podcast in a row where I'm hearing really good stories about Japan.
Yes.
And the fun is that by coincidence, all 3 were from Osaka. It was Kim. No, actually 4. Kim, she's in Osaka. She was in Osaka last month. Anastasia, I just published her podcast, and she spent some time in Tokyo and Osaka. And Robbie was hitchhiking in Japan, and he told amazing stories about people giving him a ride. There was this lady that stopped the car and left him in the car with her daughter. And she disappeared for a while. And then he looked around and he saw that she was on the road trying to get him another ride for where he wanted to go. He said, no, that's too much. So they are incredibly nice.
And it was like that. It was that way in Taiwan too. I remember in Taiwan, because in Taiwan they speak, oh God, what do they call it? Guohua maybe. National language. They call it the Taiwanese national language. It's similar to Mandarin, but there are some differences. I wouldn't say they're the same. It would be like saying that like Ukrainian and Russian are the same thing. It's not. But usually,
so they are similar, like Portuguese and Spanish are similar. They
barely
understand each other.
They may be a little bit closer, but like I could speak Mandarin with people and they would understand me. And if they were speaking, like I don't know. Taiwanese for now. If they were speaking Taiwanese with me, I generally understood, even if I didn't know what something was called, or like maybe a word was different, or a pronunciation was different, or like they wrote it differently, which happens. The one thing I noticed is that people were always super, super, super helpful. Like we were walking, and it had gotten a little bit cold that day. And one of the people that I was traveling with, she wasn't wearing like very much. Well, I mean, she was wearing like enough, but not quite enough for that level of cold. And someone on the street just says, "Excuse me, if you're," and they tried it first in English. I said, "If you're cold, you can buy a coat in that store. They're not expensive." And just kept walking. Just like if you're, and like she didn't work there or anything. Like it was, if you're cold, you go here. And I was in one of the night markets, and I needed to buy something, and there was just a bit of like a communication problem, and I and everyone was just smiling and super polite and super helpful.
Yeah, no, that's common, and I think that the French idea that the French are particularly uh, unsympathetic to us, I'm not buying that. I, I think that it depends more, really depends more on your own attitude.
Yeah.
It cancels out everything else. Like going through America.
Yeah.
Before I did my first trip on foot in America, I was concerned that it was going to be, either dangerous or that I would feel ignored or maybe even some hostility,
Yeah.
especially going to the south.
Yeah.
And that didn't materialize at all. Even when I went through, places that have the worst possible reputation, like some places in Texas or right there between Texas and Louisiana, that everybody tells you, be careful there, that's like white supremacist territory. That's KKK area. Still nothing. I'm not suggesting that the experience would be identical if I was black or if I was Mexican. But I can tell you a lot of other places or situations where it was a lot worse, like in Brazil. In Brazil, I faced a lot more complicated, sticky situations than in America. For example, in Boston, depending on the neighborhood where you are, you walk into a bar, people can be pretty rude with you until they discover, especially if they discover that like you are from the north of the city and you are in a southy bar. Yeah, it can be sticky. But then they are talking to you and and you are still smiling, you're still joking, and you're still being cool with them. It diffuses it. It tends to diffuse it. And going to America, I didn't see any problem. I only had one guy that was like hostile to me, and that was in New Mexico. And it was one redneck there that he didn't care to talk. I stopped by his house, and I was sitting on the house had this garden and some trees. It's the freaking desert. So having a garden and trees and plants in front of the house takes a lot of work. And the wife was there working, and she had the garden hose with taking care of the plants. And I said, hey, can I refill my I had the canteen. Like, can I refill my canteen? And she said, oh, of course. And she gave me the hose, and then she offered me an orange. Very nice lady. And there was this little tree, and I asked her, would it be okay if I sit here and eat the orange right now because it's nice? And she said, oh, yeah, of course. So I got my knife and I started eating the orange. And then the husband arrived, and he didn't ask, who is that, or is that someone we know, or or who that person is, or who are you? He looked at me and said, what the fuck? He started that way. What the fuck? He said, oh, this gentleman, he's running, he came from Miami, and I gave him an orange. And he said, I don't remember if it was the next phrase, but if it's not the next, it was like the next one. Was like, if he came all the way from Miami, he can get out of my property right now. And he said that talking to her, not even talking to me. At that point, I was already getting out of the gate.
At that point, you knew
I didn't even talk to him.
And...
Yeah, I wasn't even talking to him. I was just getting out of the gate. And then I left. And for a while, I felt very sorry for her. Because she was trying to be kind and, and just being a nice person. And he was a complete dick, and he didn't even know who I was. He had not... There was nothing in me or my story that justified triggering that kind of response.
Right.
But there was one bad experience compared to, I don't know, I don't have a count, but maybe 400 great experiences along the way, maybe more, people that treated me like I was one of their kids, so it wasn't bad at all.
No, it's like when I went to Moldova. And this is not representative of Moldova. I met very, very many great Moldovan people who were just incredibly friendly and incredibly nice and just wonderful people. But I got off the train at 2 a.m. in Chisinau. And I was kind of talking to myself in English, and these 3 people came up to me. And I knew they were trouble. Like, when 3 people are walking towards you and one of them's like dead center and one's here and one's here, you're in trouble. Like you're in big trouble at that point. So one of them started to say "give" in English, and I didn't let them finish their sentence. I fixed the problem and I got the hell out of there. And that was like the one bad experience. But even to round this out, let me finish the story. So I get the hell out of there. I didn't have to run. I could take my time. But so I go around the corner and I couldn't exchange money. I had no Moldovan lei on me. Couldn't exchange money. I only had, the smallest thing I had was an American 10. Smallest amount of money I had on me. Which is something, by the way, that I highly recommend is when you travel, don't just carry like 50s. Like bring small bills. Bring small bills like 5s and 10s. Especially if you're going somewhere where $5 and $10 can go a long way.
Right.
And I stopped by the stand. There's some taxis. I couldn't have internet to order a cab or to find my hostel. And so I stopped by this place. And there's some people drinking beer. A few taxis parked. And
probably the taxi drivers were drinking.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And I asked them because I remembered that Moldova was at one time in the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
So I said.
I think it still is.
So I started speaking in Russian. I'm like, excuse me, can you help me? And one of them realized that my Russian wasn't very good, that I had a very strong accent. And he said, "Where are you from?" In English. He said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Oh, I'm from Tennessee." He goes, I said, "I'm American, I'm from Tennessee." And he goes, "Oh," he said, "I lived in Mississippi for a little while, like clear, clean." And he goes, "Where are you trying to go?" I said, I'm trying to go to this hostel." And then he says, okay. And then he calls for his friend, and his friend comes over. He says, "Hey," and take him here. And he's like, "You haven't had a fare all night." No, he could have just as easily driven me himself. But he said, "No, take him here and drop him off." And the guy spoke a little bit of English, and because I obviously spoke no. It's technically Romanian, but it's different. Like Moldovan Romanian, it's Moldovan. Yeah. I didn't speak any, and so I said, "Okay." And he drops me off, and I said, "Okay, the smallest thing I have is a 10. Is that okay?" And then he could have just as easily said, "Yeah, that's right," and driven off, because I had no fucking clue how much the taxi cost. And he starts digging around in the car for like all the change he can find to give me. Like all the change he can find to give me. And gives me like as much as he could find. He said, "I'm sorry, this isn't enough." And I said, "Look, it's 2 a.m. You got me to my hostel safe and sound. It's enough." And I tried, I'm like, "Look, don't even, like just keep it." He says, "No, I insist." And it's just that kind of like, so I went from having this one shitty experience to immediately after being just welcomed and feeling just wonderful. And even now, I have this excellent impression of Chisinau.
Me too. The country is fantastic. I was driving from Romania. The road is very nice, and when you get into Moldova, it's still a very pretty road all the way to Chisinau. It only gets bad and sad between that and the border of Ukraine, which is the Transnistria, which is Russia.
Yeah.
So that
it's
part
a little
is,
Russian
I don't
island.
recommend.
Yeah.
I don't recommend. By the way, for people considering this, the reputation of that area is that they are going to ask for bribes and they are going to be, very slow without the bureaucracy, uh, and there would be bribe at every checkpoint. That was not the case. I got in. You have to do some paperwork on the way in. And that paperwork was very slow. So the slow part of the reputation is true. Took them 1 hour to do the declaration of my motorcycle and all that. But there was no bribery. There was a list of all the fees for each kind of vehicle, and it was in dollars and euros. And in mine was going to be like $4, and I had a 5 on me, and they found $1 and gave me the receipt and gave me the. So there was no bribery.
Yeah.
But that was so slow. So 1 hour to make that paperwork, and they said you need to show this on the way out. The way out of the country, 30 miles away. All right.
So in 30 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, in 30 minutes you're going to be on the other side. But that 30 minutes is very scary because there is no traffic. There is no gas station, no city, nothing. Transnistria is an empty zone. Okay. Of course there are farms and other things, but it's completely poor. It's completely poor. There is not much going on and absolutely no traffic. The entire trip from one side of the country to the other side, I saw like 2 vehicles, going the other way, and the road looks like it was, a minefield.
Bombed in World War II and nobody fixed it.
Nobody fixed it. It's horrible. In fact, actually, I didn't see 2 cars. I saw 3 cars. I remember there was a Lada that passed me by on the right. He was driving outside of the road. Because outside of the road is just dirt. Yeah, it's just dirt, but it's kind of smooth, on both sides. And I was trying to drive, avoiding all the holes, going slow, and this old Lada passed me by, not giving a shit. But it's completely empty, so you get the impression that, all right, if someone is going to rob me or kill me or make me disappear, this is the perfect place, because there will be no witness,
right?
At least no, and if there are, who will care?
Yeah, who will come look? Yeah.
Then I got to the other checkpoint on the way out, and I showed them the paper. This guy got the paper, and then he asked, "Can I take a photo?" Sure. Your bike. And then it took again another 30 minutes because every guard in that checkpoint wanted to take a photo on my bike.
Maybe that was your problem.
But I thought fine, I don't care. At least they're not giving me a hard time, and so everybody took their photo and then I left.
No, I heard similar things about the border to Russia. Everyone said, okay, oh God, as an American going into Russia by train, you're going to have some problems. Everyone said, okay, they're going to ask you for this and this and this, and if there's anything. So I crossed the border, crossed from the Ukrainian side, and for some reason the Ukrainian border loves to give me problems. Even though all of my documents are correct, they just love to ask me questions. And I just always make sure to respond incorrectly. So that I look like I'm more trouble than I'm worth, only because, A, I know everything I'm doing is legal. So it's not a problem. It's just, they're just doing their jobs. I understand, but it's
they need to do something.
Yeah. And on the Russian side, entering, they just looked at my visa, looked at my passport, looked at me, stamped it and went. No drama, no nothing. Even leaving. When I was leaving, they had all the border patrol agents come onto the train when I crossed the border near Kharkiv that they open up my passport and I looked at my visa. Now what they did do is they looked at my visa and they looked at my visa. 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 And then because my kind of visa was kind of rare, they called over the other guards and said, "Hey, in case you see in case you see this is what a real one looks like. Like showing like all of them." And then and then the supervisor comes up and says, "Everything okay?" And she didn't even say yes. She said, "It seems like it."
Seems like.
She didn't say yes, everything's okay. She said, "No, it seems like it."
That reminds me of a situation I went through in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in which I had a little bit of an incident, not a confrontation, but it was an incident, and it was not serious to have any consequence, but it was serious enough that the police took my firearm. And they said, everything's fine, all we have to do is we need to do a check. We need to run the serial number. We cannot do that over the radio because something's not working. So all you have to do is stop by the station and pick it up later. You just have to do it after 5, All right. So I called my attorney and he called them just to check. Everything's cool. Yeah, everything was cool. It was just a matter of go there and pick it up, right? So I got there and they asked me for my ID. I gave my ID. They asked you, do you have your license to have a firearm on you? So yeah, and then I gave, I showed the license, and then it was taking a little while, and there was this guy looking at my license, but then I don't know the ranking in the local police there. I couldn't tell exactly what he was, but he had more dicks on his shoulder than the other guy. So he was somehow, and they were deferential to him. So somehow he was more authority than the other guys were. So I asked him, "Is anything wrong?" Then he introduced himself to me. He was the chief of police in the city, and he said, "No, there is nothing wrong. Nothing wrong at all. I'm just looking at one of these because I never saw one." And he just said that to me. I never saw one. He is the authority in charge of giving those licenses to people that apply for them.
Right.
And he never saw one. That means they never give it.
Yeah, no, that was the same thing with like
he doesn't
the Russian,
even know how it looks like.
Like the Russian visa on a train. Like if I was going through the airport, they would have been okay, good. But going through on train, because most of the people who come through, especially that border, are Ukrainian or from Belarus or from Moldova, and none of them need visas. They can just like any, or most, I don't say any anymore, but most post-Soviet countries can enter Russia just on their internal passports, and they don't need external passports to go in and out. So for a lot of those border guards, it was the first time they had seen a real multi-entry.
A friend of mine told me that I had some questioning to getting into Ukraine.
Yeah.
But a friend of mine told me later, because he works at that. He wasn't working that day, but he works at that same border station. And he told me that, they were quite curious because it was the first American riding a motorcycle through that station that year. So they don't see it very often. Not even bikes very often, but an American biker, no, not common. But you know what was my feeling when I went through that situation, Moldova, then getting through Transnistria, and spending all that time in front of that, the bureaucracy. I was under the impression that I was going to be upset with that I would get upset at them, especially because of all my past experiences with South America. I thought, I don't have patience for this shit. But no, I just felt sorry for the guy. I felt really sorry for him. And because he was doing something that was wasting an hour of my time, but I started thinking, his entire lifetime is wasted. His entire career is pointless. and he probably suspects that. He's defending the interests of a country that doesn't exist, collecting fees that are not going to benefit his people, and doing something that is absolutely pointless, and he knows that it's pointless, So his situation is much worse than mine. I just felt sorry. What are the plans now, man? What are you going to do?
Well, in the words of a very wise person, I don't fucking know. No, right now, I know what I'm doing for the next year. I have plans to take some time in the summer, take some time for me, do some certifications, professional certifications, some professional training. And
for English.
Yeah, for teaching English, to make myself more qualified, more professional. And I think that will open a lot of doors for me.
Which, by the way, I kind of mentioned that before, but I like to say this again. If you are very good at English and you get qualified, I have seen several people already traveling the world doing that, teaching English, a few months in each country, and they go online and they find a new school in a new country.
Yeah, and you can find some really, really, really good positions depending on where you're willing to go. For example, I saw a position in the Emirates a few weeks ago. It was a 3-year contract, but they pay for your flight and your housing and a good paycheck and get you a work permit, pay for all the immigration stuff, and you teach in a school for rich Emirates kids. And the requirements were really, they had requirements. They wanted 2 years of work experience and all the appropriate certifications. And that's the other thing that I would warn people about, is that, yes, teaching English is definitely an avenue that you can go through if you want to travel. But there's a caveat. And the caveat is that if you want to work for a school, which means that you want your immigration process to be easy, that you want your paperwork to be easy, that you want job security, at least a little bit of job security, then you need some qualifications, or you need to be very lucky, or someone has to like you. Now, if you want to work for a good school, now, once you have that experience, you can start with corporations, and you could move to being, like, for example, teaching entirely corporate clients, or once you have that experience. And the other thing is that if you're good, a lot of doors will open for you. I'm not saying that I'm good. I'm just saying that a lot of doors will open for me.
No, I'm saying that you're good.
Yeah. If you're good and knowledgeable and you care, a lot of doors will open themselves for you. On the flip side of that is that if you're not very good, and if you're just teaching to travel, those doors will stay shut. So if you're going to teach, I think you should, at some level at least, enjoy teaching and want to teach, not just do it to travel.
I did a bunch of what is called English clubs, in which people just get together and they talk.
It's like a mediated conversation, basically.
Yes, you're a mediator, and for that, it's okay, because I'm not qualified like you are. I'm winging it. I can speak well. I can write well after I go through the spell checker. I can write very well.
It's okay, me too.
But if someone asks me for a rule, what does it say? The rule such and such. Oh man, I get into a tight spot with that. So I don't feel myself qualified to teach. But I'm definitely qualified for English club, and English clubs are easy. Easy to run, and you can even do that. I see people doing that on their own, like using networking. They organize the events with bars, and they get a commission on the drinks, and they end up making money anyway. So I would say that's the other venue. If you are not technically very skilled in English, but you are a very good networker, you can get by in any country. And for as long as you don't conflict with visa limits and things like that, that you can keep navigating the system without calling attention.
And you can also
you can keep going.
Yeah, and once you start teaching, you can get things like corporate classes and start building. And networking is very important for that. Yeah. And you can do corporate classes. You can teach private students. But the other important thing about those term members is that they come and go.
Yeah. And I met people teaching salsa. There was a couple that they couchsurfed with me in Miami, and they were traveling the world teaching salsa. I think he's Cuban, something like that, or Puerto Rican. I hosted a French guy once that he was on the interval between two different skydiving schools. He's a master skydiver. And he has like a bunch of schools that he visits during the year, giving classes, and between them he has like a week or two, and then he travels. So not just traveling for work, but having time between them to explore even more. So I have seen people teaching completely different.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be English. Yeah. For example, if you teach, for example, martial arts. Especially, and most people who are part of like the JKA or the WKF, just two of the big organizations, they typically know this, but it's a very standardized curriculum. So you can go, for example, from one school to another school, and things work out pretty well. Now, some things, for example, like what I practiced, it's not as organized. So, for example, for me, if I walk into a school of the same discipline, 30 minutes down the road, not like halfway across the world, it could be completely different.
I think that if you win a fight and then you need to get out of town in a hurry, yes, it suggests that it's not that organized.
Right.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yes, and I'm certainly going to meet you again in another part of the world.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. This was Chris Reese. Thank you so much for being here, man.
Glad to be here.
Okay. We hope you like this podcast as much as we like to produce it. This has been made possible by the efforts of dozens of volunteers, supporters, partners, and visionaries that are helping us build Voyager's World. Please visit our website, join us for free, and start participating.